Hey guys, it's 242 here, and today I'm going to read you 2 stories from the subreddit Malicious Compliance. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories. Just before I start the first one, I want to disclose this does have a lot of vomit in it, so if you're someone who can't handle it, I will have a timestamp in the description on where the next story is. So our first story is, Don't Believe My Allergies? I'll behave and let you deal with the consequences. Back when I was in grade 5, 5th year of school, we went on a camping trip. It was great. I had an amazing time with some good friends and first real camping experience. Every night the dinner was alright, no complaints. Well, the last night was hot dogs. Before the camping trip, the parents all had to fill in a sheet about allergies and special requirements. Well, I filled in I was allergic to hot dogs. Don't know what it is, but the ones with the red skin don't agree with me. Well, on the last night, I approached my teacher, female, and let her know. She wasn't having any of it and told me,
"We all have to do things we don't like."
I asked if I could just have a bun with cheese and sauce. Nope, all or nothing. Fine. I sucked it up and ate the whole thing. I could have taken the sausage part off, but I was hungry and was only allowed one bun, so I did what I was told, full well knowing the risk. Once I had one bite, I knew these were the ones that would set me off and knew what would happen. So all was good, and we had our showers and brushed our teeth and went to bed. I got up quite a few times, but the drop toilet was disgusting and someone dropped their flashlight. I felt okay enough to go to sleep and wasn't sick yet, and the teacher made a sly remark.
"See, I knew you'd be fine."
Went to sleep and all was well. So I thought. Middle of the night I woke up in a cold sweat. Threw up in my hands, all over myself and a friend's sleeping bag. Friend opened the tent half asleep and I threw it all over the front of the tent. I didn't know this, but it was all through everyone's shoes and everything. The other teacher woke up to me vomiting in the bushes about 30 minutes later and got me water and leftover buns to try and dry it up. I was okay after that, and that teacher, male, gave up his tent, sleeping bag, and slept in his car. Bless his cotton socks. Well, the next day the bus came and we all got on, and I had to sit at the front with the girl who hates enclosed spaces. Yeah, they believed her and her panic attacks, but not my allergy. Almost back to school, and I felt round 2. I asked the female teacher for a bucket since the male teacher drove himself and wasn't there. She was talking to the driver and wasn't interested. The girl with the panic attacks asked, and she still refused, saying,
"We're almost there. Just hold it in and leave me alone."
She was too busy chatting up the bus driver to care. Well, almost there or not, I could not hold it in. I was covered. I was wet, a tiny bit wet onto the girl next to me on her leg, and I felt terrible. The teacher gets up and finally gets me a bucket, but it's too late now, and gave the girl 2 full rolls of paper towel to clean up about an inch of vomit. I asked for some because I was covered, but got nothing. This bus only had one door at the front, and the walkway was leaning down, so the vomit traveled from the 3rd, 4th row all the way to the front, and everyone had to walk through it. I was to lay off because the teacher expected me to apologize to everyone. I got so many looks, some sympathetic and some disgusted. When I went to get off, she stopped me and told me to apologize to the bus driver. I turned and said I was sorry. She wasn't happy with that and told me to be louder. He was disgusted with her and told me accidents happen and not to worry about it. She went on to say,
"This was no accident. She didn't feel like hot dogs, so this was my punishment."
Well, I went to my grandma, who was there to pick me up. She was less than impressed and demanded the school give me something alternative to wear home. My clothes from camping were dirty. I was 11-ish, so I was always playing in dirt. They gave me an old crusty uniform to wear home. The whole class had to write apology to the bus driver from me. There was some nasty stuff said about it because they were held in their lunch breaks for a while I took the rest of the week off. He was supposed to have another job driving people from the retirement home around or something, but had to clean the bus instead. By the time I got back to school, I found out my grandmother rang his school almost daily. My first day, I had to go to the office where I expected by the teacher to offer another apology. I did, and the principal was like, "Well, that isn't why we're here, actually." Teacher was shocked and was like,
"It is."
Then she had to apologize to me. All I got was a
"Sorry."
And 11-year-old me was too shocked to be a smart arse and say, "Sorry, speak up, but kind of glad I didn't, because the principal told me to wait after she left and offered me another." I got to swap classes and everything. He said I handled the situation very well for someone so young, and anyone should be proud to have me as a child in their class. Full disclosure, she saw me as a problem. My mother wasn't the best, and I was taken away for a while. When my dad finally got me back, he had to live with his parents. According to the courts, I needed a female in my life. I arrived to school almost halfway through the first term and had a counselor with the school every day, and she hated that I missed class, and in turn hated me. I didn't have the right uniform because when my dad was granted custody, they had like a week to organize my whole life, which included moving. So the teacher looked down on me from the start, and I wasn't worth her time. Sorry if I did some mess ups. It was a little awkward due to the way it was written. Opie doesn't mention how long ago this was. This seems more of an older thought to me. But to me, it's not Opie's fault the way their family life is. Opie has to do stuff to get themselves down the right path. And this teacher just didn't want to give poor Opie the time of day. I had something similar happen to me as a child, and both my parents absolutely ripped this teacher a new one. I am very happy Opie got out of this classroom, and I'm happy Opie seems to have gone on with their life. And hopefully they find out why they can't eat hot dogs. And our last story is, a Catholic teacher calls for my suspension for asking the wrong questions. I decide to behave. This happened years ago, at what turned out to be my last year at a Catholic school, for reasons that will become obvious. I don't have anything against people of faith, but it's not my thing very early on. I was 12 years old and in 7th grade. I was becoming disenchanted with my Catholic upbringing. I had so many questions, and it might have saved my faith to have them answered reasonably. The adults didn't want to reason with a curious 12-year-old. They wanted to see a nice Catholic girl who didn't feel compelled make so much distasteful noise. Sex ed was still part of any Catholic curriculum, and as it turned out, my religion teacher, Mrs. M, was also my sex ed teacher. When she opened up our first sex ed class with,
"Now, I'm just as embarrassed to be here as you are,"
I didn't see it as an expression of empathy. I saw it as a grown woman humiliated to be teaching basic biology. It made me sad. Junior high sex ed wasn't just biology though. It was an effort to shape our view of the world. Mrs. M taught us sexual health as per Catholic doctrine, and also peppered in some of her own weird personal viewpoints, shaped by her own history, I guess. We had this box at the front of the class where we could discreetly write down and drop off the questions we were too nervous to ask out loud. Someone asked what orgasms feel like for women. We knew men ejaculate, but what do women do? Mrs. M did not explain, perhaps because she hadn't had one a day in her life. She said,
"The woman's orgasm is not a necessary part of sex. It is not necessary for procreation, and sex is for the purpose of procreation."
That sounded very dodgy to me. I brought her statement home to my mother, who had always been very open with me about these things. I asked her if women really weren't supposed to enjoy sex all that much. She was horrified. She told me a lot of men like to make women feel good, and sex should feel good for everyone. Then she said something that would be lastingly valuable.
Ask questions in that class. Teachers are supposed to answer your questions, and if they can't, maybe they shouldn't be teachers.
The next class, Mrs. M taught us that homosexuality was a sin. This was too much for me. I had a gay uncle who had been a huge fixture in my life. I felt attractions to girls in my class, and I refused to believe God would think who you love is worthy of hellfire. She went on to say gay marriage was both impossible and wrong. I raised my hand and asked her penitently, "Why is gay marriage wrong?" Her answer was,
"Because they cannot procreate, and procreation is the purpose of marriage."
I sat silently. I did not demonstrate agreement nor dissent. I went home and thought about that for a while. I needed to come back to sex ed class with an inquiry that was going to properly F Mrs. M's S up. It didn't seem like an easy task, but I came up with something I thought was worth trying out. The next sex ed class rolled around. Mrs. M taught whatever stuffy, deplorable lesson she had planned. Then she opened the class up to questions. I raised my hand, she called on me, and I asked, "If a woman is infertile, but she really loves the man she's with and wants to share the sanctum of marriage with him, does the church approve of this marriage?" It was a no-brainer for her. Of course. I followed up with, "But she can't have children, and marriage is for procreation. Why can she get married, but two men or two women who can't procreate can't?" Anyone who is seasoned in Christian apologetics can explain this one pretty easily. But I had hit Miss M somewhere deeply personal in front of 30 other children. Mrs. M was a married woman of around 50 or so, with no children of her own, very unusual for a Catholic woman who doesn't believe in birth control. Mrs. M was infertile, and to her, I was questioning the sanctity of her marriage and its validity in the eyes of the God she had dedicated her life to. It was a sucker punch, and she couldn't collect herself to punch back. She instead flew into a rage. Her face became a deep shade of red, and she said,
"This is not a debate class,"
and sent me to the office. For context, I didn't know Mrs. M was infertile. It was something my mother told me post-office battle. An apology letter was determined to be insignificant for Mrs. M. My mother came to collect me, and a battle ensued. Mrs. M wanted blood by way of suspension, and my mother was having none of it. Curious kids don't get suspended for questioning what they're taught. The only thing that worked in my favor was my history of being a nerdy, non-disruptive child with good grades. A compromise was struck. I wouldn't get suspended, but I could not participate in sex ed class nor religion class. My grades in those classes would be determined solely by my written portions. Those written portions were completed at a desk positioned outside the classroom, which Mrs. M smugly carried out for me every class. I didn't mind working outside the classroom because to me it was a good example of the ease in which an adult can collapse under a child's questioning. I decided that religion and sex ed would become my specialty classes. I would master the curriculum. I would get the best grade I could, and Mrs. M would have to watch it happen. I worked very hard, harder than I had in any other class. I studied at length and did additional research online. I finished up the semester with about a 95 in sex ed and a 98% in religion. The final exam for both classes were entirely multiple choice. I was permitted into the classroom to be supervised for the exam, and there was no room for her bias to creep into her grading. She passed me that Scantron sheet back from the religion exam, 100%. I thanked her with a saccharine smile. She fixed me with a grim expression before moving on to the next classmate. A few days later, it was my Scantron sheet from the sex ed exam, 100%. I said, "Thank you for all you have taught me." As I smiled up at her, she said something under her breath and moved on. Mrs. M hated me with a distinctly unchristian-like passion, and she found other ways to express it in the following semester. It warms my heart a little to think of her having to grade all my schoolwork, one correct answer after another. The relentlessly curious, heretic nerd girl was a pain in her side that wouldn't go away. Worst of all, she demonstrated that she understood what you were teaching, she just didn't believe in it. Wow, Opie, I love this story. I love the fact that you were able to demonstrate something completely logically, and you didn't know at the time, but you really hit it where it hurt. And then you went out of your way to make sure you aced her class. Bravo! That was amazing and well worth the time reading. So that's the end of our video, so make sure you hit that like button if you enjoyed the stories, to hit the subscribe button if you want to hear more from me, and of course, ring that shiny, shiny bell. Thank you all for listening and have a very good day. Bye!